I think we can start. It's a few seconds past 11:30, so then it start. And if other participants join, we definitely welcome them. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. In this session, we talk about two initiatives that seek similar goals, which is improving the work condition of immigrants, especially racialized immigrant women. The first initiative is Safer Workplaces by City and Color Cooperative, and the second is Migrant Workers Centre BC's work to facilitate access to justice for immigrant and for migrant workers. Here's a quick overview of the session. We start with land acknowledgement and then have a short introduction of the presenters today, and talk about the project overview of the Safer Workplaces project. And then here we're going to hear a story of one of the lived experience co-researchers of the Safer Workplaces project, Alejandra, who's here with us today, and then talk about findings and recommendations of the project. And then we hear from Juan about Migrant Workers Center's advocacy work. And then we have a Q&A and a roundtable discussion. The land acknowledgement here, we acknowledge that we are on the traditional and ancestral and unceded lands of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. As we discuss workplace justice, we recognize the ongoing struggles of Indigenous communities and commit to learning, unlearning, and building solidarity. And here are the partners and supporters of the Safer Workplaces Project: Pacific Immigrant Resources Society, South Asian Legal Clinic of BC, Migrant Workers Centre, Solid State Community Industries, SFU Urban Studies, and this project is generously funded by the Law Foundation of BC. My name is Rahil Adeli. I'm a co-founder and co-director of City in Color, which is a nonprofit urban consultancy founded and led by racialized immigrant women, whose mission is to bring the perspective of racialized communities into the planning processes. The communities whose perspective is usually excluded from these processes. And today here with me, we have Juan Trevino from Migrant Workers Centre, and also Alejandra Villanueva, lived experience co-researcher and graphic and animation designer of the Safer Workplaces project. And yeah, I pass it to Alejandra and Juan to introduce themselves, say hello to everyone. Alejandra, you want to go next?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the space. Thank you, Rahil and Juan, and happy to share some words with all of you about this research. So thank you for this invitation.
Thank you, Ale. Thank you, Rahil. Hi, everyone. My name is Juan Trevino. I'm a legal advocate with the Migrant Workers Centre, and I've also been collaborating with Safer Workplaces in the last year. I don't want to say since the beginning of the project, but I've been definitely involved at different stages, and I've been very lucky to work with Alejandra and Rahil and others in this great project. So very happy to be here and share some of the knowledge and things that I do and that we do as an organization as well.
Thank you. Also, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us where you're joining from, what province. And during the presentation, if you have any questions or comments, please add them to the chat and we'll respond them either in the chat or during the roundtable discussion part. So I start with giving an overview of the project and the issues we are trying to address. We know that racialized immigrant women in BC, including highly educated ones, they often end up in low wage and unsafe jobs. And many of them face discrimination, harassment, and pressure to stay silent. And language barriers, immigration status, and lack of trust in the system make it even harder for them to speak up or to get any help. And about the Safer Workplaces project, this project aims at bringing forward the voices of racialized immigrant women to expose hidden workplace barriers and co-create solutions for safer and more equitable work environments. This presentation is actually based on the previous phase of the Safer Workplaces project, which was done in 2024 and early 2025. Thanks to our founder, the Law Foundation of BC, we were able to secure funding to continue the project for the next phase, which is from mid-2025 to mid-2028. In this phase, Migrant Workers Centre BC is one of our major partners. So in the previous phase, which I'm talking about today, we worked with 12 racialized immigrant women along with service providers, legal clinics, unions, and community partners. Pacific Immigrant Resources Society, one of our partners, helped with recruitment, community connection, and research support. We also got help from Mosaic BC for recruitment, and South Asian Legal Clinic of BC led legal education workshops for our participants. So through workshops, storytelling, interviews, and public events, we explored women's workplace challenges, especially around health and safety and accessing WorkSafe BC. And our goals were to raise awareness and support women with legal knowledge and recommend policy changes. And a little bit about our approach. So over 8 months, we met regularly with 12 women, lived experience experts of the project. They shared personal stories, learned about their rights, and built community. We also interviewed advocates, union reps, and community workers to understand the systemic barriers. And we share the results of this project, what we have heard, we found through events and conferences like this one, and through social media, photography and video, a final report, and also reaching out to relevant groups, organizations, community members who are active in this area. And storytelling was a big part of the project, with guidance from writer Shanga Karim and human rights photojournalist Natalia Botero and graphic designer Alejandra Villanueva, who's here with us today. The participants created written stories, voice recording, and photos and videos. So the project participants, as I said, wrote and narrated their story, and Alejandra and Natalia created videos and photos based on these stories. So now we have 11 stories accompanied by photos and videos. And here we would like to show you one of these stories, Alejandra's stories, and then hear directly from her about her experience. So I'm going to show Alice's videos here.
In the heart of a vast land where dreams take flight, A butterfly once soared with hopes of a better life, leaving behind the familiar warmth of home. It chased the promise of opportunity in a kingdom of towering trees and endless fields. This butterfly flew many miles to reach that dreamy land, but what it found was not the lush paradise it had envisioned. Instead, it was thrust into the shadows of a cavernous, dust filled place of work, where the air was thick and the weight of exploitation bore down on its delicate wings. Their words, sharp as thorns, fear, threats, mockery, and disdain wrapped around it like a choking vine. It had never known that a place could feel so vast, yet so suffocating. Then came the injury. A sharp pain tore through its body, and for the first time it faltered. It had always believed that pain was something to be endured in silence, just as it had been taught. But intuition whispered otherwise. With trembling resolve, it sought help, navigating a system never meant to be understood. It was a labyrinth designed to deter rather than support. A glimmer of hope emerged when it found a refuge willing to guide the way. They helped with the wing, offering a small beacon of light in the darkness. Fear wrapped around its heart like a vice. The butterfly decided to speak, to claim the right to dignity and safety. It was a terrifying act, yet necessary. The supervisors turned cruelty into sport, their words laced with venom, insults about language, appearance, and color, fueling an already toxic competition among the others. The butterfly felt the weight of it all, the crushing isolation, the unbearable injustice. Yet, despite the countless times it wanted to stop, it never gave up entirely. Even when its wings were tattered, it pressed forward. Because beyond the storm, beyond the weight of injustice and pain, there was still something worth fighting for. The butterfly refused to break. With every trial, every indignity, they hardened and transformed, no longer delicate, but forged in steel. The pain, the fear, the relentless struggle had reshaped it. It was no longer the same butterfly.
Thanks for listening. This was Alejandra's stories. This was a story that she wrote, and then she also helped with creating the video of this story, along with the stories of other participants of the project. So here I would like to invite Alejandra to talk about her experience and add more context to it.
Thank you, Raheel. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for this space and also for giving me like the time to share some of my history and experience here in Canada. So, well, I came here in Canada almost for 2 years ago. I came here to work in agricultural working, as all of us chasing a dream. But what I found, it was less, it was not an opportunity for me. It was more exhaustion, fear, and silence in this kind of industry. From outside, these kind of places looks like peaceful, but at the end, it's an industry that always threat you, do mockery, and do a lot of bullying to many of workers that they basically don't speak English, basically speak Spanish. And well, really fear. We also told like to be blacklisted or deported at that time if we were not working fast enough, if we were not good enough, and also taking any breaks means to be like that you've been called lazy for these kind of people. So like all of these things that I live, I every day I ask to myself, like, is this modern labor or is this is a modern slavery? So it's really a big and challenging things that I live in this kind of industry as well. Housing was another kind of form of control of these kind of industries, because usually we live like 20 or 30 people in one house, and HR and managers have all control of us. So they know with who you talk, where you're going. Also, you don't have any privacy, and there's a lack of privacy as well, and respect for you as a person and also as a worker. I often translate to many of my coworkers from Spanish to English because they barely can speak some words in English. And I try to like soften in some of the insults of these managers because they can barely speak that language. And I was not able to continually hear all these threats and insults that it was just so cruel from these kind of industries. So yeah, because this kind of housing control, I decided to live by my own. I decided to live outside of these farms, but also doing this was also like a punishment. So HR and the management and this workplace where I was at that time, it would start to punish me because I was also receiving only the minimum wage. So that it means that I was also skipping meals to pay my own rent and do my own transportation as well. So it was quite challenging and heavy at that time. This kind of works, it's just like they want to control where you live, where you going, with what you eat. They want to control everything about you because at the end, you have closed work permits, and this is how they can control everything about you because you depend fully and 100% on them. With all of this experience at this workplace, many months of heavy and safe work, I have an injury, as you saw on the history about about me, sorry. But I have an injury in the shoulder that it was just really difficult. I tried to reach many help outside, and it was quite challenging as well. I end with a work safe claim as well, but also because I didn't have any knowledgement about how this works. I feel a lot of fear at the first times because I thought I'm gonna be deported. And that's what these kind of industries and managers, they told us, like, you cannot put any claim, you cannot do any complaint about us because that will mean that your work will finish and you will be done. And it is just like a circle that it's so systematic that it's just this kind of fear. And that's why many people doesn't speak about this because their work depends on fully 100% on these employers. Many of supervisors, I receive mockery, I receive bullying. Many people slapped my shoulder when I was injured, and it was really quite challenging. The modified duties, as I said, also they were really heavy, and I ended like in a worse scenario for my injury in the shoulder. And part of the challenging was that also WorkSafe was not giving me any backup, even when I had said like I need some help because the employer are not respecting the policies of safe work. They didn't do anything about that. So it was a lot of challenges and barriers about how the system works, especially for workers who barely understand the system that it's supposed um, to help you. Supposed to do. I believe that that was one of the biggest parts that needs to figure it out in another way. Because every time when you put any claim, these inspections are announced like maybe 1 week before, right? And when WorkSafe it's arriving to these kind of places, everything is perfect, everything is clean, everything is quiet and happy, and you have to pretend that everything is okay. And besides that, there's a lot of like the reality is pain, chemicals, a lot of things that are not working okay, and everything is unsafe. But when it's announced with many time, everything is perfect for them. So this was also part of one of the things that we saw for this project, that this has to improve, or we can find out the way to make the things better. Because of the injury, we also receive a lot of trauma because we have, well, in my case, I developed a lot of anxiety, depression, panic attacks, and this was caused by this kind of pressure from these kind of workers that punish you, push you to do all the time more and more and more, and no complain because they don't believe that you're a human. They believe that you're like a robot or something like that, that you deserve less than the minimum thing. And yeah, the things that we also find out that it's the closed work permit are one of the biggest challenging in these industries, because you fully depend on these employers 100% in housing, in living, like the payment, where you're going, and everything what you do. So it's like a legal form of control from them. And also, if you're speaking, that it means that you will lose your job or your status or also your dreams. Even the institutions that means to protect us, like WorkSafe or many others, they often believe the employer's versions because your world as a foreign worker, it's worthless for them. And you need to have a lot of backup and a lot of other people who see or saw the same things as you do, but because of the fear, less people talk about this, and that's why many of these industries keep doing what they can to keep holding this kind of treatment for all these people. So yeah, with all of these, I believe that we still have a lot to do, especially with WorkSafe, because the responsibility is all the time on the side of the people who are injured, on the people who doesn't can go back to their previous work, and it's less on the side of the employer who is the responsible for having on a safe work to be a workplace without bullying, without harassment. And yeah, I understand that many people in this industry, it's in the same conditions as I do, because of these closed work permit that you fully 100% depend on this employer. So I survived to this kind of place. Thanks also to Juan and Rahil for giving me a hand at that time when I needed so much. I know that we still have a lot to do with this kind of industry and labor work immigration thing. Um, and I also believe that we deserve safety, we deserve fairness, and we deserve to be believed for everything what we've been through in this kind of works. And we know that Canada, it can do much better things for these kind of problems that are continuing in the agricultural programs. So yeah, that's the part of the story for me. So thank you so much to all of you for hearing some words.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. It really takes a lot of courage to share your experience. I know that the experience has been very traumatizing, and being able to share that with others, with this very valuable goal to bring change and improve the situation of our community. It's very impressive. If there is any comments or questions about that, we can open the floor for a few minutes to talk about this, or we can continue and have questions about this later in the chat. I also, sorry, I haven't been able to monitor the chat. I was just able to check that and noticed that my sound wasn't very clear, apparently a bit low. I did some changes in audio setting. Is it better now? Okay, great. Thank you. So there is a question in the chat. I was just curious, where was this in Canada? What province? This was in BC. Or Alondra, do you want to respond yourself?
Yeah, it was in BC here. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, maybe we can continue with the rest of the presentation. And so here I like to talk about findings and recommendations of the Safer Workplaces project. And these findings are based on interviews with 7 key informants, and we have come up with some findings and recommendations. And what I share here with you are very high level summary of these findings and recommendations. The first findings is that the gender, race, immigration status, and economic pressure overlap. There's an intersection of all of these different factors that impacts racialized immigrant women's experience. And this community, especially temporary foreign workers and international students, they often work in unsafe or male-dominated environments, and many stay silent out of fear. And there is also language and system barriers, and if there is health and safety training, it is very rushed, very unclear, and often not in a language that workers can understand. And there is also digital literacy barriers that get in the way. And even when help exists, it's usually too technical or not culturally relevant. And there is also systemic barriers in WorkSafe BC processes. WorkSafe BC is very hard to access and feels rigid. Harassment, bullying, and trauma is often gets dismissed or misunderstood. And there are delays and lack of follow-up that causes many women to lose trust in the system. And unions also often fall short. Some women don't understand what unions do, and many who do understand, they don't feel supported, especially around bullying, harassment, or racial trauma. Policies exist, but they don't always translate into real protection. And next, we'd like to talk about some of the recommendations, like the recommendations that we had for this project. There should be more education and awareness. Workers need clear and accessible training, especially on self-advocacy and communication. Cultural navigators and advocates is needed. Women need someone who can guide them through WorkSafe BC and workplace systems. And language and cultural support is required. Translation and interpretation must be trauma informed and also culturally sensitive. And support for temporary foreign workers is essential. WorkSafe BC should have a dedicated temporary foreign workers unit with specialized training. And it's necessary to fund community legal clinics and groups to support workers from the beginning, not just during the appeal stages, which is something that's happening now. And proactive investigation is required. WorkSafe BC should take more initiative and in checking on vulnerable workers. And employer education is also required, especially racialized employers. The trainings for them should be provided in their own languages before penalties are applied. And building trust is also very needed. WorkSafe BC needs to work with settlement organizations to rebuild trust with them. And field officers should be trauma informed and aware of the power dynamics. And more flexible medical evaluations is required. We should allow workers to use doctors they trust and I already connected with. And integrated case management, it's very crucial to link physical and psychological injury claims to reduce delays and stress. This is not happening right now. And two final points I wanted to share is that WorkSafe BC is not alone in this. There is also Employment and Standards Branch, Ministry of Labor, the federal immigration system, and other factors. These all shape what happens to workers. And these pieces must work together. And the second point is that what we shared today is very high-level overview. There's going to be a full report that includes more detailed stories. Some of them are very painful and shocking about harassment, about exploitation, unsafe housing, and dehumanizing conditions experienced by migrant and racialized women. And we encourage everyone to read the full report when it's released. It's going to be on our website. Now I pass it to Juan to talk about the important work that Migrant Workers Centre BC does.
Thank you, Rahil. And thank you so much, Ale, for sharing the story. We really appreciate that. And I think it's hard for some people to learn or to hear directly from migrant workers. It's really valuable what you shared today. I hope all of you that are joining the session today can share these experiences with other people so that they know that although there is a lot of work to do, which there is, and that's why Safer Workplaces exists as a project, and that's why the Migrant Workers Center exists as an organization, right? There is a lot of work to do, but there are also a lot of actions that we can take collectively. And so I'm hoping that after the end of the session, you can take that with you and you can share with people in your community because racialized immigrants are often the ones that are more vulnerable to abuse and exploitation in the workplace. And in Canada, that happens much more often than most people would expect. So I am, like I mentioned earlier, I am a legal advocate with the Migrant Workers Centre. I have been working with migrant workers since 2019 in different capacities. And I've only joined the Migrant Workers Centre in October. Very, very happy to be part of this organization and just really, really grateful to be able to do this work at this capacity as a legal advocate. Our organization provides legal services, legal education, public education for free to migrant workers in BC. And when we say migrant workers, we mostly refer to people who are going through abuse or exploitation. That is our focus. And we are able to support people who have a closed work permit That means that they are tied to an employer, just like Alejandro was, tied to a specific employer, and they're not able to work for anybody else. That is the great majority of people who come under the Temporary Foreign Workers Program or the International Mobility Program here in BC. We do have certain criteria as to we can help because we have a maximum wage of threshold when it comes to supporting people. We try to focus on low wage folks and low income people. And we can also, in certain cases, provide support to undocumented workers, specifically those who may be going through a situation of abuse or exploitation. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So within the services that we provide, we are able to support with work permit applications, certain permanent residence applications, and employment law violations. So our focus is in immigration and employment law, but particularly, like I said, for people who are experiencing a situation of workplace abuse. This could be bullying, harassment, exploitation, unsafe working conditions, or an active case or a case with Works ABC that they need to file. So we will be probably exploring more of that in a minute. And as part of our work as well, we try to advocate for migrant workers in different capacities. This means also reaching out to parties that might be interested in collaborating with us, right? So we do a lot of advocacy work at the federal level, but also the provincial level to advocate for migrant workers and really push for changes in the immigration system, right? And this includes advocating for the elimination of closed work permits, advocating for permanent resident status for everyone, and fair practices at all levels, including at the level of Works ABC, for instance, right? Where we see a lot of challenges, accessing the services, getting culturally appropriate service, interpretation, right? I think Rahil mentioned that there is the recommendations, as relevant as they are to Works ABC, they are also relevant to other bodies. And Employment Standards Branch is a great example because as of today, Employment Standards Branch, for instance, they do not offer interpretation services for people who make a complaint through the Ministry of Labor. So if you're a migrant worker or a racialized person and you don't speak English, then it would be essentially impossible for you to communicate with an Employment Standards Branch officer. And that is something that we, as an organization, are also looking into and challenging as well. So I don't know if you could go to the next slide, Rahil. Thank you so much. So some of the services that we have at the Migrant Workers Centre here in BC are the walk-in legal clinic. We do this in person at our office, and the purpose mostly is to make it as accessible as possible for people who cannot come during a weekday or who may have a more immediate, more urgent situation, and they need to get legal advice or legal information. This is done in our office. We will share the contact information at the end. We try to do it we don't try to do it. We do it every other Saturday. We post the dates on our Instagram page and our website as well for people to come. It is very popular, and we try to support as many people as we can on the day of. This allows, I think, it's very low barrier because it allows somebody to just come in and feel safe, because we know a lot of people don't want to share something if they're not sharing it in person, and if they don't know that the person they are meeting it's safe for them, right? So we try to make it as accessible as possible, not only in terms of making it without appointment, but also having somebody that can talk to them in their own language as best as we can. When it comes to health and resources, we have these fairs that we do every summer, most of the times, but also we do some in the fall. And our resource fairs and health fairs are done in collaboration with other organizations. And in those fairs, we try to bring together different people, different stakeholders. Sometimes there are people even from Works ABC in those fairs, sharing information about the services that they offer. And mostly we want workers to get as informed as possible, get connected with the resources in their communities. We do this in different areas of BC. So there are some that happen in the Lower Mainland, but we have others in Grand Forks, Ceremillos, Cache Creek, and other areas outside of Vancouver. When it comes to advocacy efforts, like I mentioned, we do collaborate with a lot of organizations and community members and stakeholders to strengthen the advocacy efforts. And this is something that we do on a regular basis. at different levels, like I mentioned. And we tried always to center the voices of migrant workers around this. So when we hear stories from migrant workers, either through our legal education workshops or just by engaging them in the process of advocacy, we are able to center them in all of our work. And lastly, we have our public education and resources. Sorry, Ricky, I don't know why, but the presentation stopped. Oh, it's coming back up, I think. Yeah, so lastly, we have our legal education workshops, and these workshops are meant to provide a more intimate space for workers to share in a safe space. They're usually a whole day workshop, and we provide information on relevant
Sorry,
topics.
not sure if just me. It's not able to see the screen.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I'm not sure if we're having issues with the PowerPoint. It should be coming back up in a minute. Thanks, Raquel. It says that it's that you started sharing. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us know. I think I was looking at something else. Thank you, Rahil. And so, yeah, for the last point or the last resource that we have is a public education and the resources that we put out for migrant workers. This is something that we're, of course, constantly evaluating and changing based on the needs and the immigration changes and employment regulations as they happen, especially here in BC. But for the most part, when we talk about public education, we try to create an intimate space for workers to learn from each other, of course, to learn from the knowledge that we have to share, to advocate and organize themselves. Our legal education program, it's offered for people from different industries. For example, this year we're presenting it for migrant workers who work in agriculture, caregivers, and people that work in construction and other areas. And so every session is a little bit different. We try to incorporate resources and information that is relevant for every industry. We do this in collaboration again with other agencies and with people who have a specific knowledge around safety, around employment standards, for example, around human rights in the workplace, and everything that has to do with your well-being and your safety in the workplace. These workshops are free, and we try to compensate, but we don't try to. We compensate workers for their time when they participate in all of these workshops. We also offer very good food. So it's a great place to learn and to get together. Um, I think this is one of the most, in my opinion, this is one of the most impactful work or like resources that we can offer, because there's not many places where workers can share, and like just like we learned from Alejandra, and like we have learned from this project from Safer Workplaces. I think one of the things that many migrant workers lack is the space for them to come together in community, to learn and to share. And many migrant workers are dependent on the employers for housing, which often prevents them from accessing services and from learning from other organizations. Many employers will go as far as to prevent migrant workers to connect with organizations because they are afraid that if workers educate themselves, or like not educate themselves, but just learn from each other and like find resources on public legal education, they are afraid that they will become quote unquote a problem for the company, right? Because we know the power imbalance is so big that when workers are able to organize and learn from each other, it's one of the few ways in which they can take action, right? And we have seen that happening. So it is one of our, I think, most impactful workshops. And if anybody's interested on that, we can always share more information later. I don't know if we have one last or that might have the lesson. So that's just some pictures from our health and resource fairs, and then from our workshop, which happened just a few months back. And yeah, do we have another one right here?
No, thank you so much, Juan.
No, perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So if there are any questions specifically about what we do as an organization, you can let us know too.
Thank you so much, Juan, for sharing about the important work of Migrant Workers Centre. I think that people who work in BC, at least, in any immigration-related work supporting immigrant communities, they've heard about Migrant Workers Centre, and they're doing very great work for the community. Thanks for sharing that, Juan. So I think that we are, yeah, very good timing. It's just 12:15, and we like to go to the next part of the presentation, our roundtable discussion. I want to thank you for being here and for engaging in this conversation with us today. And we heard an overview of the Safer Workplaces project and insight from the Migrant Workers Center's legal and legal work and the work that they do for the community, and also frontline experience from Alejandra. Now we'd love to hear from you, hear your reflections, your experience, and ideas. There we have some questions here. I can guide us through a few questions, and but please feel free to jump in organically if you feel more connected with some other questions, or you have any comments or insights you want to share. So the first question is that we want to know what you think about the problems and barriers we shared here that were revealed by the Safer Workplaces project and Migrant Workers Center's experience. Have you personally had or had witnessed or heard of similar experiences in your own work or in your community? You may raise your hand and talk. Feel free to open your video if you're comfortable, or you can type in the chat if you prefer. And also, Juan, you at any point, please join the conversation, or if you have any comments or opinion.
Thank you, Raheel. I think while we wait on people to hopefully bring up some questions or comments or experiences, everything is welcome. I think I may have forgotten to mention that within the Migrant Workers Center, we also support undocumented people. But I also wanted to acknowledge, since Safer Workplaces has a focus on racialized immigrant women, this is a conversation that we're constantly having. And I see it when some people approach me in this position and in previous positions, and they approach our organization. There is a recurrent situation where people who are in vulnerable positions are often in that vulnerable situation because they don't have the same freedom of mobility as other people would have. And I think this is true, yes, to migrant workers, to people with closed work permit, and to undocumented workers as well. But it is also true to other communities, and we see that a lot with people who may be refugees, for instance. I'm not very familiar with the refugee process and the different stages, but I know that at some point, for example, some refugees will have a work permit, for example, and because they have been so traumatized by the process of having to explain themselves to the government in order to be admitted as refugees, right? There is often this perception that people, who challenge an employer or who may try to take action in a situation of abuse, right? Essentially, anybody trying to advocate for their rights they're often perceived, or they have a fear that they will be perceived as a problem, and that would have an impact on their status or on their refugee program process, right? Or in many cases, like migrant workers with closed work permits, that they will not be hired again. And these are very real concerns because we have seen it happening, at least in the case of migrant workers, where they take action to protect their rights. There is action taken against them. So yeah, I just want to put that out there in case people in the participants today, in case you work with other communities that aren't necessarily migrant workers, just to acknowledge that many other communities also experience that challenge to a different extent, perhaps, but it happens. And I see somebody has Diego has his hand up, Rahil. Yeah, I don't know if you have a question, Diego. You can go ahead.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Juan. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to share, yeah, I just felt it was a great presentation on this topic. And I previously was involved, like that is not my current job, but I previously was involved with Reach Community Center and Watari, both sanctuary locations, right? So um, as a peer support worker, just having kind of frontline experience with some of the migrant workers across BC. Actually, there was a post-pandemic or during the pandemic 2 years ago, Watari would receive calls for kind of it was a connect the direct kind of peer kind of like crisis line that was temporary funded by, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the provincial. So there was a temporary funded like a crisis line. So we would get calls from migrant workers in Ontario. So this what you shared, Alejandra, the issues with closed work permits. Yeah, I had was involved in that, and I appreciate you sharing those stories. Um, no, I just wanted to share that well, just had a question regarding the project. You said that there was going to be a full report that's coming out, or is it already out?
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Diego. Yeah, we all know that there are so many problems in this area, but the frontline workers and supporters are definitely more involved and aware of. And actually, uh, we were connected with one of your colleagues, Watari, in the previous phase, and they shared great insight with us. There is a graphic report with a shorter that includes all this, findings and recommendation, project methods, and photos and that we created. But there's going to be a full report that's going to be published soon in a month or so. Yes, and we will
Awesome.
have that on the website.
Amazing. I also just actually I wanted to say I also know a family friend of Natalia Botero. So
Oh.
very cool to see that.
Yeah, Natalia is a very active friend and a member of City in Color now. She actually joined us in another project when we were working on a housing related project, wanted to know the
Mm.
housing experience of refugee and refugee claimants. And she has been very active, very talented. She's a refugee claimant here for the ones who uh, don't know her, and she's a protected person here in Canada. And she is a very talented artist.
Yeah, I think to that point, it I'm trying to think about the similarities that racialized people experience, right? And as you know, and as Alejandra shared, migrant workers often depend on their employers for housing. And I think similarly, many people who are here on refugee status or as protected persons, they might have situations where, they had a hard time finding housing, right? So for the balance of in power, whether in the workplace or in a home, it's similar in both cases. And I think it's important to acknowledge that because having to essentially be struggling to find proper housing, that has an impact on your workplace, right? As well, and it has an impact on how well you can perform because you're living in a place where you don't feel safe or comfortable. And we see that happening all the time with migrant workers, particularly people who work in farms, people who work maybe in rural areas, right? It's really hard to it's really hard to rest when maybe you're sharing the room with a lot of other people, when you don't have the proper equipment to cook, right? Or your house is not clean, or you don't have heating, or you don't have AC or even a fan during the summer months. These are very real situations. And since we're talking about immigration too, I think it's important to acknowledge that with all the changes that are happening in immigration, many people, unfortunately, they might become undocumented or lose their status because they're not able to access permanent residence. And those who may be able to access permanent residence might put themselves in situations where they have to jeopardize their safety, unfortunately, because they may be close to getting their PR, right? And we have seen that happening many, many times. So I would consider that to be another factor on safety in the workplace, being tied to your employer or having relationship between your employer and your immigration status. In many cases, that prevents people from denouncing an unsafe situation, and then they might get injured or go through a difficult time. Yes, Diego.
Um, I think what you raised, Juan, regarding, all the recent changes, actually, that was going to be my follow-up question. Um, just if there, what has Migrant Workers Centre or just all the other participants, have you heard about, is there going to be any changes or anything coming down the pipeline in BC regarding the temporary foreign worker program or Work BC? Anything being discussed? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can certainly speak to that with respect to recent changes. I mean, the new immigration plan is not promising and is not good, and there has been many cuts to temporary, not like temporary foreign workers specifically. I don't have the specific number, but we have seen a lot of changes that have made it difficult for family members, for example, to be able to remain here with their, together. The spouses of migrant workers, it was it was relatively easier before for the spouse of somebody with a closed work permit to come with them. It was relatively easier for their children to get work permits if they were at working age, and now that it's becoming very, very difficult. And you can imagine how devastating it would be for somebody who's building their lives here, and they may have been here for 4 or 5 years maybe, and now all of a sudden with these changes their family is going to have to be split up, or if they decide to stay, then they're not going to be able to stay with authorization to work. So they're making it incredibly difficult for people to survive, and let alone survive, but to even make it to to get any chance to getting PR. So we see those changes happening, and we're anticipating that people who are undocumented will have to find new ways, evidently, to be here. Migrant workers, regardless of their immigration status, they have the ability to make reports. For example, with Works ABC, it does not matter if you're an undocumented person, you can still make complaints with Employment Standards Branch and with Works ABC. But the risks of making it, especially as we see attempts from the government to share information between government bodies with new bill C12, which is being pushed right now, right? There are real risks on the undocumented workers, unfortunately. So we try to take that into account when we do any kind of work, and I think eventually we're probably gonna publish some information about the changes, but mostly I think for people to get informed about it, the government of Canada should have published already like the new numbers for the 2026 levels immigration plan. And yeah, it's definitely not good.
Thanks for sharing that, Juan. And we know that at the same time that there are lots of more restrictions for immigrants and changes in immigration policies, there's also a lot of cuts in budgets for the organizations that are supporting immigrants. So it's a very special timing, precarious timing for immigrant communities. And I think that we uh, different organizations who are working in this area and offer support and services to immigrant and refugees communities. They it's going to be more tough for them as for the community, and we need to support each other and raise more awareness about the situation. So we appreciate more connections and collaborations and connecting with each other, and that helps to join forces together to see if we can make the situation even a little bit better. And regarding the questions that we put here, I wanted to go through the questions and like kind of guide us through the questions. But please, if you resonate more with any questions here, or you have any other questions or suggestion and anything you want to share, we don't have to, follow this order necessarily. Yeah, Alejandro, go ahead.
Hi, just to add something about what we are discussing here, about the work safe experience. As we know, there is a lack of things that are going through that organization. That is part of why we keep like waiting a little bit more, because many people are not speaking about, because they are fear to lose their jobs, but also like the responsibility of you as a worker that are injured, and not part of, like, they're not talking more about the responsibility of the employer, that it's the one that it's supposed to give you a safe work place to stay or to live, or also these like when they go to the workplace and everything is so perfect, so clean. I know there is an issue not only like in agricultural programs, but also in other industries as well. But yeah, hopefully this can change in the future, in the near future.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing. Wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just curious if anybody has had any experiences with Works ABC here. I'm not sure if the people that joined um, are, working directly with immigrants or migrant workers, or you might be a migrant worker yourself. But yeah, I was just curious if anybody has experiences with Works ABC or questions, because I do think the actions that one can take through Works ABC is very big. Like there's many different things that Work CBC takes care of, like from, from reviewing cases of bullying and harassment, or from taking cases where somebody has been in an accident or had gone through an injury, including mental health injuries. So there's like a wide variety of things that you can report through Work CBC. We don't believe that all of them are addressed correctly. And we have very many cases where workers have challenges communicating with play managers, and where the workers have felt invalidated, and have been invalidated by people that work with Works ABC. Um, but we still want to recognize that this is part of the work that we do, right? And part of the reason why Works ABC, Safer Workplaces exists, to try to create that change. So I don't know if anybody has questions around that, or any interactions they may have had with Works ABC or work safe in the is work safety related matters. So Raheel, if there aren't any more questions, I was thinking maybe we can share some of the I mean, we could go to the other questions, but they're also there. So if anybody wants to go back to them or share with respect to those questions, um, we can build on that. But I was wondering if, going off from these questions, if we can maybe share some resources, because I know we have their questions about strategies and policy interventions that we should consider. And I just, before we offer like I think we have a section with resources. I just wanted to share community resources if that's helpful for people who may be working with somebody and um, and that person is going through a situation in their work. There are, of course, organizations like our organization. If you are joining from somewhere else, we do have connections with organizations in other parts of Canada, and we can help you connect with them. But mostly, I just wanted to give a recommendation um, based on the experience that we have seen working with migrant workers, and that is that it's important to always, if you're talking with somebody who has a closed work permit or who has a precarious immigration status, it's always very important to recognize that they might be very well aware of their rights. They might be very knowledgeable on policies that exist about around Works ABC, around Employment Standards Branch. They might know more than you about workplace safety, and they are not able to take any action because of their immigration status. And and I'm sharing this because it happens often when we see people who provide services, and this happened to me probably more than one occasion, when you have the best intention to support someone, and so you share resources, but without acknowledging that those resources may not be useful for somebody in that specific immigration status, right? So to tell somebody, well, this is a report that you can make, this is the action that you can take without acknowledging that taking that action could have an impact on their immigration status or could potentially result in retaliation from the employer, that is not useful for that person, right? That is not useful for migrant workers or somebody that feels unsafe, right? So I think there's other actions that can be taken. And in the context of the workplace, oftentimes workers have the option to make anonymous reports. And if it's a big company and that's safe, that's an option that can be explored. Their Works CVC has a tip line where they can also report situations if they think that there's an unsafe practice going on that hasn't been properly addressed by the manager or supervisor. There are ways to do that. And if it's somebody that's here in BC and they just want to learn on what are those options, of course, they can come to us and come to our legal clinic, but also to talk about it with people in their workplace, because I feel like migrant workers have been uh, so constantly under control to the extent, and other racialized immigrants, they have been so constantly under control by their employers, that they have fear to even discuss these things with other coworkers because they think if I share this with my coworker, I'm going to be perceived as this difficult person, right? And like Alejandra shared, yes, there are people who have been perceived as a difficult person, right? But there's still power in sharing your story with other people in your workplace, especially if that other person is also an immigrant and is also somebody with similar conditions, let's say a closed work permit, for example, because they might share that view with you and they might want to take action with you. And I think part of the process and the conversation in safer workplaces is to help people develop and rely on those skills to actually communicate these things better and to acknowledge the risks together in community and to take action together. So we're always welcome in, at least in Migrant Workers Centre, and of course in safer workplaces. We're always welcoming people who just want to have a conversation and learn more about it. And there are many resources that can be shared and actions that can be taken safely without compromising other aspects of your life, especially your immigration status, which is the priority for the majority of migrant workers and racialized immigrants in this country. So
Thank you so much, Juan, for sharing this. Yeah, as Juan shared, we about the Safer Workplaces project. In this phase of the project, we are hoping to still gather more data, do a survey, and engage with participants. We're going to have more engagement sessions in the next 2-3 years, and we're going to create peer support network, and in which there will be workshops, and we still collect stories of the community. So if you know anyone who is might be interested in joining the project as participants, please contact us, especially racialized immigrant women who have had experience of workplace harassment and injuries, and interacted with WorkSafe BC, and would like to share their story and be part of the group. And I think the presentation, the slides have been is on the website. You have access to them, but here I've shared with you some of the materials from the Safer Workplaces project, the report that I mentioned. They are all in our website too. There is the video gallery, or 10 more videos similar to Alejandra's videos, and photos that beside the photo there is also a full story that the participant wrote, so you can hear their experience and what they have been through in their workplace. And there is a podcast that we did an interview about this project with Press Progress podcast, and health and safety tips for workplace health and safety for racialized immigrant women, which was developed in collaboration and conversation with South Asian Legal Clinic of BC. And there's all of these are on the project webpage as well. And yeah, thank you so much for listening and for being part of this conversation towards creating a more equitable and safer workplace. And if there is no more questions or comments, I think we can wrap up. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. There's lots of great presentations in the conference. Hope we can join some of them before it ends. Thank you.
Thank you.